Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello and welcome to Expedition Self. I am Sam Parrotto, your host and fellow sojourner and growth geek and all around student of how to go inside. Well, today we're going to talk about human anger, the unseen and untethered, which is really the anger. I wrote this kind of as our write-up for today's show. Anger that emerges when you least expect it. Anger you may not even realize is at work in the background, and even explosive anger that can result in physical altercations. I imagine that for most of you have a sense of where I'm headed here today, but I'll hold that thought. Before we go there, I do want to return for a moment to my last show that I did about innocence. And I have had a number of people talk to me about what they took away from the show afterwards. And I want to make sure that this idea came through about innocence. I talked a lot about what interferes with our innocence, but what I really want you to take away is that we need innocence if we are to grow. We need to reconnect with it. We need to cherish it and cultivate it and honor it, because this is what actually creates wisdom, right? It's a necessary tool in your toolkit. And I feel like we spend a lot of time on that. Like, what should you be putting in your toolkit if you're going to be somebody who goes inside and really works with that inner relationship, right? Adding new tools and new skills and new understanding, right, about who you are, how to get more relationship to who you are. So this is a call-in show. 202-570-7057. All you have to do is dial that number and you will be greeted by Chris, the show's producer, and he'll let me know that you're waiting to talk. I don't care what you talk about. I just care that you engage, and it's really fun for me when you do that. And hopefully you find that it makes our conversation even a little more meaningful as well for you. So the Oscars for me were the last straw. It's what compelled me to want to do this show about anger. Last straw, right? Anger is everywhere. I realize that I mention it all the time when I point to the road rage that I see, which often includes hand gestures, a lot of honking, scrunched up faces, expletives being screamed across lanes repeatedly, and driving that is aggressive and fast. And that's just on the road. But I feel like when you watch what's happening on the road, you get an idea of also what's happening with people, because it's this moment when they're driving, right? Driving on their own to get somewhere where there's nobody managing or containing or controlling, right, what they're doing largely. I think it's a big time meaningful indicator, right, of what's happening at the human level. And then there's all that conversation I pick up when I'm out in the world. Who has done what to who's not speaking to someone anymore. You know, the latest tragedy when someone lost it with their girlfriend or let loose of their self-control at the local pub. Conversations about issues that are central to our humanity are filled with outrage and righteousness and hostility. And of course, there's no way you can miss the anger being flung on the political front. Grandstanding, drama, disrespect, and the language, the words they pull out to, of the English dictionary to put down the other person. Go beyond that, and we've got a ton of anger on the world stage. I don't even need to speak about it, but it's everywhere. and it's graphically depicted on every social media channel, and it's being churned up by bots who aren't even real people, actually in the business of trying to keep it all stirred up. Oh, so when Will Smith hauled off and slapped Chris Rock in the middle of the Oscars, I thought, oh, we have got to talk about this. And I'm sure by now, if you saw the incident, you've probably read everyone's debate about whether he should have done it, what should happen now because of it, how he should be penalized for his actions, all of that. But I'm not going to weigh in on whether it should have happened or not, or that kind of debate. Instead, I want to talk about how your anger is like his anger, and like Chris Rock's anger, and like my anger, and like the anger that's pumping, literally, rushing through our collective global bloodstream. So if you don't know this, on Oscar night, Chris Rock made a joke that wasn't really a joke about Will Smith's wife, Jada, and her condition, alopecia. And all of a sudden, you see him walking up on the stage, and he hauls off and slaps Chris across the left cheek. And Chris Rock is stunned and tries to collect himself and go on. Then Will returns to his seat and basically yells at him with an expletive about keeping his wife's name out of his mouth. And he does this twice, the second one with even more angry intensity behind the words. The reactions of people in the event are so evident of what happens when we are completely shocked. I think it was a traumatic moment for everyone, and everyone who watched it, and everyone who's watched it since. I didn't collect the data about how many times these videos have been watched. At least that's what I see, is this a traumatic moment that means the emotional material overloaded what anyone could process. They were all sitting in it, along with the rest of the people watching it over the video, over the TV. So I want you to think about this. Right now, our world is in trauma. No matter which side you sit on, or the many sides that there are to sit on, you cannot avoid that people everywhere are being violently shaken up and their lives disrupted. In the most extreme ways, like in the Ukraine, or in the out-of-control public shootings, which, by the way, barely get reported on anymore, and in the less vicious ways, like the price at the gas pumps or the cost of food. Right now, our world is in trauma, and we're now, right at that moment, we were watching someone who we see as privileged, who's an everyday person, who we all probably have an affinity towards of some kind or another, be the instigator, be the actual perpetrator of violence. And I'm sure you have other areas that you see it happening more and more. On your kid's soccer field, at your job during meetings as managers are squeezed under the pressure, and in your social groups at the Saturday afternoon barbecue or pub crawl. Yeah, we're starting to be squeezed out of our lives because of all of this anger. And it's becoming my favorite new word, normalized. I don't think I ever used that word up until probably the last 5 years of my life. I know that may mean that I was missing something in my education, but it really never connected. But things are becoming so normalized that used to be unacceptable, that the word normalized has actually gotten over normalized. And of course, this means that the Will Smith Oscar event has become a feeding frenzy on social media, right? Everywhere, like fodder filled with memes that are mean-spirited that aren't quite as funny as I think they are, discussions about toxic masculinity and the nature of love, and debates about whether it was a real apology or not, and videos showing him having a great time at the after party, hence no remorse, or an opportunity to question the Academy's responsibility in the whole affair. It goes on and on. Maria Shriver even weighed in, saying, he wants to be a vessel of love, period. Love is not violent, period. Love is not what was displayed on the global stage tonight. I feel like being angry has become some new and evolved Socratic method for persuasion and interaction. And sometimes the anger doesn't just come out in caustic, cutting, and scathing words. Sometimes it leaks out into the actions. And I want to say that you cannot dance with anger, and you can't dance with anger that's unconscious and not have it leak out somewhere, even if it's not the person being the angry one. So I want to see if I can make this point, right? I went through that whole list and I ended with Maria Shriver's quote about love. Dialogue and exchange that fuels public discourse and allows for people to become more knowledgeable, it's been around for a long time. Greece is well known for its development of democracy and the need for public speaking by probably by like 650 BC. You know, they saw rhetoric as this necessary form of persuasion. Lots of big names had something to do with this evolution, like Plato and Aristotle and Pericles, you know, great sophists who contributed to making speaking a new form of working out issues and human engagement. Hang with me, I am going somewhere. And I'm sure that anger that appeared as passion in that speaking back then has always been the mark of a great orator. And it would probably come as no shock to you that we have been violent throughout all of that time, and human beings have felt anger through all of that time. So I want to share an excerpt written by R.T. Oliver, who wrote a book about this. He said, persuasion is the civilized substitute for harsh authority and ruthless force. And he said that the recipients of any persuasive discourse must feel free to make a choice. So in a free society, it is persuasion that decides the rules and determines behavior and acts as the governing agent in human physical activities. In every society, I'm still kind of quoting him, in every society, individuals are continuously attempting to change the thoughts and or actions of others. And it's a fundamental concept of a free society. And Ian Harvey suggested that the technique of persuasion is the technique of persuading free people to a pattern of life. And it's the only way to combine freedom and order. That the combination, this is the point, successfully achieved is the solution to the overriding problems of our time. But in actuality, right now, it's actually stirring up anger on all fronts all the time. So what I'm trying to say is that anger will always find an outlet. And that it's a challenge we've been working with like for thousands of years because it's intrinsically human. And when there are great times of change, anger is going to feel like it is completely out of bounds. It's going to start to feel like it's closer to the surface for everyone. And the more we witness it, the more we are open to feeling it. The more we witness it, the more we experience that so-called persuasion with anger fueling it, the more we're going to be open to feeling it. Because anger is a collective conversation. It's felt collectively. And if it's going to ebb back into a more balanced state, then we must all do our part and see it for what it is, because we're being affected by every sliver, every strip, every drop, each and every hidden surge of angry energy as it comes through words. And it's speaking to the anger inside of each of us, calling and urging and cajoling and persuading. It's like, you know you're angry. You've built up resentments. You have a reason to be angry. Look at the difficult things that have happened. So when Maria Shriver says that anger that results in violence is not love, I would say it's not a loving act. But if we say that when we're in touch with our anger, it's not love, then aren't we saying that we are not love? Because every part of who we are includes this anger. You see, we're in denial at some level because we're all working out this idea of I'm trying to be love. But this anger is all around us. We're participating in it. The violence is the acting out of anger. The behavior we're saying is unacceptable. But we human beings, we're really not that skilled in handling our anger. Precisely because we spend so much time trying to be loving. Precisely because we spend so much time trying to be loving. All right, so when we come back from break, we will take this conversation to the next step.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Okay, we are back. I'm Sam Parrotto. You're listening to Expedition Self, and we're talking about unseen and untethered anger. And before we went to break, we were really talking about how the more we try to be loving, the more we're not going to really give the attention that's needed to anger, and that this anger is all around us all the time, and it's rising. So it's collectively building mass, and the more that goes on, the more it's going to erupt. It's kind of like when we talk about the chemicals on the periodic table, right? They all 118 of them have an atomic number, right? When you look at them, they have properties about them, and that's how they're studied. So how oxygen will perform when mixed with carbon dioxide, or how mercury will interact with nitrogen. So I'm saying that anger is like one of those chemicals in the periodic table, but it's a human element. And anger, when mixed with resentment and helplessness, fear and deprivation, depending on the degree to which that happens, it will blow. So on the night of the Oscars, after Will Smith blew, Denzel Washington came up to him and he said, "The devil always comes for you when you're at your highest point." I don't know how many of you read this or picked this up, but it was one of the first things I noticed. Years ago, I watched Denzel on an interview, and one of the things he talked about was what an angry man he was and how hard that was to work with. I feel like he really got it. I think in that moment, so poignant that the devil in his mind is the rage, right? The rage that he worked with in his own life. But it says actually something more. It's that the devil, in the way he spoke it, that had Will lose his composure, his self-containment, and his self-regulation, right? But I think actually there are many people who see anger as a bad thing, as the devil, symbolic and maybe even literal, in the way that Denzel spoke it, depending on what you believe. I think that's part of what happens, right? So how do we create a relationship that recognizes anger as an absolute legitimate element of our life experience when we're seeing it as this thing that causes us to lose control and that is a bad thing? And I'm here to say that I think we have a responsibility as a society to start seeing our anger as a critical and essential element of being, one that asks us to learn new ways to notice it and to be with it, to process it and uncover it, because it really likes to hide, really loves to hide behind the "I want to be loving" motto. I am a loving being. I want you to consider that the more Will Smith talks about wanting to be a vessel of love, that it actually stifles our open and honest relationship with anger. So here's the question of the hour. Where do you stifle your anger? Because you feel like it's a bad thing and you don't want to have it burst out unexpectedly and without your consent. This is a good time to call in 202-570-7057. I'm making it easy on you. I would love to know the answer to that question. Where do you stifle your anger because you feel like it's a bad thing and you don't want to have it burst out unexpectedly and without your consent? Anger bursts out in lots of ways that are borderline, meaning they're not overtly violent, but they are unrestrained. Whoop, couldn't get that word out. And outside, right outside of what's manageable. And this is what I wish for all of us. And I'm going to go one step further. So I said, where do you avoid it? But the real question at this time also is, what are you absorbing right now in the world? Right now, that causes you to feel helpless and resentful and afraid and outraged? What are you absorbing right now from all this anger that's in the world? And what is this absorption connecting to within your own life? Where are the moments that you've lived through? When are the moments that you've lived through that anger would have been present? And maybe it actually was present. You felt it, you knew it. And how did you process it? So what I'm trying to help you work with is this idea that you have a piece of all of this anger somewhere, someplace in your own growth work. You have a piece of all of this anger. You carry it in you. It's your piece of the collective space that we occupy together, all of humanity. So someplace in your growth work lies an uncovered, unrecognized chunk of the whole. And if we want to shift the world, then by going inside and really squaring off with our own anger, we're going to A, understand what others are going through better, and B, have more capacity and skill to encounter the anger out there, and C, will be releasing the pressure cooker that's happening in the collective unconscious that we're all a part of. This is such an important choice. It's an important commitment you make to work with your own anger. All right. Hey, Denise from Arizona. Gosh, tell me about you and anger. I'd love to hear.
Well, as you were asking the question, I don't remember even the exact question. And I'm thinking more along the lines of, where don't I stuff my anger to look better, look nicer? I remembered whenever I was 12 years old and I slammed a door, and my dad took the door off the hinges and had me sleep with the door. And oh my gosh, the resentment and anger that I actually carried with that, because I happened to get caught and my twin sister was, I mean, that's another whole thing. But I think that feels like a defining moment to me of, it's not cool to show your anger. And
yeah, because you actually got in trouble. You got in trouble for being angry, and it actually kind of bursting out of you.
Yep.
Yeah. So instead of, if you don't mind, just staying a few minutes. So instead of actually talking about the source of the anger, what got focused on was the door being slammed.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then when you talk about feeling so resentful, it would be kind of like you didn't actually get to work through it. And then you got another layer of anger rolled on top of whatever was behind the door slamming.
Upon. Yep. Yeah. So whenever you asked that question, it was like, oh my gosh, really, where don't I stuff it feels like more of a place to be or start. I don't know, but that's what came to me. So
let me validate that, because remember, you want to always, especially when I talk, you always want to go with what shows up, right? Because that tells you a lot about, this is what your psyche is ready to deliver for you. I would leave you with this idea of how cool to go find an old door and go crazy on it. As part of a conscious processing of that door moment, right? You throw the door around, you throw chains on it, like whatever that looks like what an interesting opportunity to kind of drop into that.
It as you say that too, it left me mad at my dad. And it left me mad at my twin sister for a long time. Because in my mind, it was, she did just the same and even more, and I was the one that got caught. So I had a whole bunch of anger swirling around in that I wasn't even aware of.
Well, that's that resentment that's there. But that's why I'm actually saying that the anger around the door slamming, right? It looks like the second part was directed, but actually to get in touch with the raw anger, the door would be the place to work it. Right?
Okay.
Because the door is
I'm
the
trusting
place
you
where
on that one.
Actually dropped.
Yep.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting. Maybe you'll pop back on after you do it if you decide to, and tell us like what showed up, right?
Like in this hour or later on?
No, sometime
later on. Okay, yes, okay. I don't know where a door is right now.
All right. Well, thanks so much for calling. I appreciate the vulnerability in your story and the willingness to put words on it all.
Well, thank you for this show, for sure.
You're welcome. All right.
And the beginning speak. You too. Thanks.
Wow. So that's what it sounds like. Thank you so much, Denise, because I think that's what it sounds like for us is we have to really put words on it and listen to ourselves and think about what's really going on. And the reason I focused on that door is because remember, I'm talking about that we have anger that goes on top of things, but what we really want to get to is the source of our anger, the feeling of it, the not being afraid of it, right? Because anger is the outflow of squeezing and stuffing and storing and shelving. And it ends up oozing out of our real experience of being human. And it becomes the gathering spot for anything within our own experience that's overlooked or left unseen. And it boils until it turns cold. So when I asked you to look at what are you absorbing right now, then it means you also want to notice what you absorbed throughout your life. So Denise, in your story, you absorbed all of that stuff that was happening in your family that had the door, right, become something that was unacceptable to slam. So when you absorb through life, I'm saying, yes, we absorb from other people. We absorb what they're saying. And that's what I was trying to say about this idea of rhetoric and Aristotle is that persuasion is happening unintentionally. So, and where didn't you deal with the circumstances and situations that actually made you happy? Think of it this way. For every hour of helplessness you felt, it translates to a teaspoon of anger. If you felt an acute high volume of helplessness that had something to do with your survival or your sense of identity, then it translates to a tablespoon for every hour. And if you miss the occurrence of feeling helpless, like you didn't notice it, it's unseen, then it's swimming around down there inside of you, finding ways to exist. So maybe you are someone who translate the unseen helpless places turned anger into empathy for others. Or maybe you're someone who procrastinates all the time and doesn't make the things happen that you want. Maybe you're someone who functions in the world, but actually plays it all out on that highway or with strangers on social media. Yeah, I'm suggesting that we really must take ownership of this deep connection to anger and hostility if we are going to see the world to begin to go in a different direction. I was in a conversation this morning with a group of clients, and one of them said, no matter what God said, you never have a right to go hit someone else unless it's in self-defense. And then another one said, but the humor, the comedian, they're always roasting someone. It's just part of what they do. It should be expected. I imagine that you have your own views on what is acceptable and what isn't. But what I would like to suggest is that because it happened, it's showing us that the anger that we're absorbing and that lives inside of us that we may not have connected with, that it's starting to cross boundaries we didn't think could ever be crossed. It's redlining. And unless we recognize that it's redlining, and capital A and D here, and that we can have a direct and powerful relationship to bringing that level down, then we're going to keep seeing new, shocking, unexpected outbursts from people and situations we would never anticipate. And so when I say, how do you work with anger? How do you work with any inside self thing? In that moment, I hope it's okay, Denise, that I'm going to refer to this again, but in that moment, right, instead of actually working with the anger, your father worked with the behavior, the outflow of the anger. So this is what we want to think about, is that it starts with taking the case that you have anger, even if you can't get in touch with it. And it means that you look for it. Now, this is a super important skill or I don't know, set of steps, right? You collect a full inventory of every place that you can find it. You look for it in the environments you occupied, not just your expression, but everybody else around you. So in this case, the environment I occupy includes Will Smith's actions. So I'm looking at that. But if you look into your past, because it's not just the present we're hunting for information from, if you look into your past and you look at the people around you that you grew up with, you want to notice what their anger did or didn't do. And notice what you thought of it. So I know this might seem kind of dry and laborious, but it's really the place I start all of my self-development work. I give my intellect something to do, to go find. And this inventory is a way to do that. And I start out with a hypothesis. I feel anger that I don't know I feel, right? That, like, I take the case about something. And it gives me a way to start to play in the unknown, right? It gives my intellect a way to play with it, and it allows my unconscious self to start serving up information that fits inside of that gap between where I am right now and what I'm aware of and that which I'm trying to find. So, okay, I don't want to start this next piece that I want to talk about, which is toxic masculinity. I don't want to talk about it until after the break. So we'll go to the break, and when we come back, we'll pick that up.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
if you could find a way,
To get inside.
each other's mind.
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
I'm back. I love that part. Walk a mile in my shoes. That's what we're doing, right? We're saying, all right, I'm going to get in my shoes. Anyway, before we went to break, I said we're going to now talk a little bit about this concept of toxic masculinity, which is basically this idea, right, that we can give ourselves permission to just unleash and feel justified in it, right? Like we just lost control or something. So the thing is that we are all a combination of masculine and feminine qualities and energy. So toxic masculinity isn't only found in the territory of a man who gives himself permission to act out physically in an angry way. It would also be found in our own internal experience, whether we are a man or a woman. And really, I think it's the result of being unskilled and incapable of making contact with the vulnerability that comes from this feeling afraid and helpless, deprived and resentful and at risk. I think we're all kind of unskilled here. It's not like most of us have grown up in an environment where there was a stand or a commitment to talk about every potentially traumatic moment or every situation that caused us to have feelings. In fact, for most, it's quite the opposite. Get it together. Suck it up, buttercup. Oh, you're not hurt. You're fine. Stop crying. I don't see any reason for you to be upset. Get with it. Right? The commentary and responses to stifle or stuff or ignore this core material that produces anger, it's just endless. And I'm saying that anger is really the runoff. It's the sludge from a lifetime. And the more it builds up, the more it doesn't remotely stay in its designated area. Even if you may think it does. I think that a lot of times that anger is inside of a lot of our blind spots, or the way that we, compartmentalize, right? Like, oh, I'm not this way here, but I am there. So for some, the designated area does look like someone who feels entitled to act angry and maybe even blame others for the reason that they're angry. For others, the designated area for anger is within a space where they just close the door. There's that door thing to the room. And they find a way to avoid all the conversations or the scenarios that would accidentally open the door and let it all out. So there's a kind of numbed out way of relating to life. Maybe even the development of addictions as a way of coping. Saying, I'm angry about that thing or this is only just the beginning. And saying I'm angry about a 2-year period of time doesn't get it either. This is where I'm really trying to help you think about how to go in here. You must identify as many specific, explicit moments in time when you felt angry and then connect them with your body. This is so essential. Blanket statements like, oh, I had an angry childhood, do nothing to release the tension of anger hanging around inside the self. If you have a teaspoon of anger for every hour you spent, then you have to actually find each of the teaspoons, give them words, and then be willing to connect them to the body. I think about how people who are really focused on exercise, I wish I was more so, and using their body. And that's a channeling of these teaspoons and tablespoons. It has to be in there somewhere because everyone feels afraid and resentful and helpless and vulnerable, right? For them, it goes somewhere. I know I'm repeating this over and over, but I would like you to leave my show today and get that anger is as much a part of us as breathing and feeling sad, and that we've relegated it to being a bad thing and we're avoiding it. And now when you look around the world, it's threatening to breach all of our standards for interaction and conversation and sharing the world together. So let's for a moment talk about the people who are in obvious positions of power. I'm going to take it away from you for a second. The people who pursue having more power. And they may look like they serve their own need to dominate and control. Perhaps they look like humanity is not important to them, that the only thing that matters is filling their ego to 100% and letting it run rampant as long as they can get away with it. So perhaps you've never been in a position of power where you would give yourself permission to act out in this way. But I do see pieces, chunks of it, small ones, with parents and their children, with managers and their employees, with friends with other friends, and family members with other family members. Now, I said pieces. So I am asking you to look at these moments that might feel justified as expressions of anger. And I'm suggesting that anger is fueling the more outrageous and shameless and glaring examples of this in our world right now. For just a moment, I want you to sit in anger from your life. Find a real place where you can feel it in your shoulders, pumping through your veins, the heat behind your eyes, the muscle in the back of your calves. Go to a time when you felt true anger. Okay, I'm going to assume you found it. So now I want you to think about and notice all of the limiting thoughts that keep it in check. I wouldn't want to hurt someone. What would people think of me? I don't like feeling out of control. I'd feel like a bad person if I said or did that. I don't want to go to jail. Whatever these thoughts are, keep staying in contact with this anger in your belly. Now, imagine that all of those thoughts don't exist. They're not there. So all of that anger has nothing to interfere or disrupt it. And now let's take the case that we didn't work through life in a way that allowed us to help or build a workable relationship with it. Those thoughts actually act as a sort of restraint system for the untrained self. And without that, and with the right circumstances, not so much right, but the fitting circumstances, all that anger is free to cause destruction and act out of hostility and strategize and organize itself so that person never has to feel vulnerable. This is what is at work right now. This is what is at work right now, and I want you to connect with it in yourself so you can have a deeper understanding about it, so that you can bring yourself into a different place of conversation, both within and with others. But here's the rub about it. When we don't really own our internal angry places, and someone who gets that kind of freedom with anger starts acting and playing it out, then we can be drawn to them because they are giving a voice to what we wanted the whole time. And we don't mean it. We don't want to do that. We don't even know it. We empower those people without realizing why or how, and it looks like, we're agreeing or disagreeing with some viewpoint. But what's actually at play is that our tempered, angry spaces are being channeled into their unlimited use of anger. So seeing this at play is an important element to starting to lower that red line. Is this making some sense? Right? I keep talking about, we're surrounded by anger, but how do you get yourself really in your body, at the source, looking and feeling and connecting with everything that's been part of your journey so that no one else can play with it? I'm saying that our unworked anger is tied to their unworked and fully expressed anger, and we've got to get a hold of it. This normalizing that's happening, that's causing more and more of it to make its way over the lines, it has something to do with what we haven't worked through. So every mind-boggling act of violence in some way has to do with this. It has to do with our societal relationship with anger and hostility. We can start seeing it for what it is. The problem now is that it's really scary. And it feels like it's completely overpowering us. And now we have to protect ourselves and we have to meet the anger with anger. The key is to be super conscious, to be super responsible with what you do and with your actions. And to go inside the self and collect all those moments, those teaspoons from your life and begin to feel them and give them a voice. Anger work can happen at the gym, but you actually have to connect with anger, specific anger, from that inventory while you're working out. It happens when you sit in the front seat of your car and you yell about how helpless you feel. I hope that wasn't too loud. I pulled away from the mic. And it doesn't have to sound articulate. In fact, a lot of times the feeling of anger is very visceral and comes out more like a growl, right? I think that was probably too loud. Anyway, anger work happens in the body. It happens through the tear ducts. It happens in a journal, and it can happen when you play the drums, or you cut wood with an axe, or you go at a door, a wood door. But you have to know that you're working it out. You have to form a conscious, attentive relationship with the feeling of anger. I want to say something that's going to seem like it doesn't fit. See, when you invite anger in, you want to give it attention. You want to enjoy feeling it. You want to create a level of freedom for it to express itself. I remember when I used to roll around in the ivy in front of my house, or I used to play in the leaves in the fall. bringing anger to that would have made it so much more powerful for me. And maybe I wouldn't have been a Will Smith in 6th grade when I hauled off and hit somebody who was teasing me. Maybe I wouldn't have found myself not able to handle the anger and rage in my body. So there's more work to do, but this part is harder. And it has to do with learning how to dialogue with yourself. Now, I'm not going to go into this today, but how to do it and go into lots of detail, but anywhere you can get your hands on Gestalt videos or ways to be in conversation with yourself in the moments that made it to your inventory, these moments are needing dialogue, right? So that they can be worked through and reframed and give you a place to express them. They give you an opportunity to say the things you didn't get to say, to look for pathways that wouldn't have been apparent at the time of the situation. Inner dialogue is a huge inside self tool, and the better you get at it, the more you can then write and dance and do things that now have a purpose because they're grounded in your own growth process. They're a foundation for working through the anger that's associated with a lifetime. And anger is associated with everyone's lifetime. Whether you call it something else or not, it's in you. It's a byproduct of feeling human. And you get to be responsible to work it through, to claim it, and to give it a productive release. And that will make the people who are in these so visible roles, it'll stop amplifying their anger, because the amplification process is what produces an event like the one at the Oscars. It doesn't justify it or make it acceptable. I'm just saying that you do have the power to impact the rising intensity and hostility of the world we live in. Now, I know when I started the show today, I made it seem like people who use this event as fodder were in some way different than me, but I want to make sure I definitely acknowledge I just did the same. I may have a different take on it all, but it was the last straw for me. It got me going. And I think it has done that for so many people because it happened. It happened in a place that kind of behavior has not been normalized. People in their role do not assault their colleagues, no matter what happens. So this is a good time to think about what has become normal for you that's funded partially by anger in your life over the last 10 years. What have you gotten comfortable saying and engaging about that you wouldn't have dreamed you would have done before? It's time to think about where our own lines need to be drawn, to restake what we want to be normal in our life, and how do we be the person with the purple crayon? Nod to Harold and the purple crayon in our hands. How do you take on the idea that you are being influenced each and every day, persuaded to normalize more and more anger in your midst? I think about the Greeks, that this idea of public speaking, the meaning of rhetoric, was at the source of democracy and making a democracy work. But we're seeing that all of that persuasion that's part of public dialogue, when it's unconscious and driven by anger, it causes a dehumanization to begin to happen. I think we've reached a limit to our current understanding of modern debate and open discourse. And I think we have to rethink how this persuasion is undermined by a society that doesn't have the tools to own the true source of passion and anger, so that what gets discussed is cleaned up and actually furthers our shared human experience. So I think I have time to read this one poem here. Yeah, it's right here. Okay. It's called "I'm So Mad I Could Scream" by William Cole. I'm so mad I could scream. I'm so mad I could spit, turn over a table, run off in a snit. I'm so mad I could yell. I could tear out my hair, throw a rock through a window, or wrestle a bear. On thinking it over, I will not leave home, but I'll put all my anger right here in this poem. I'm feeling much better, like peaches and cream. For a poem is the best way. I felt like that poem totally embodied what we were trying to say. I hope that this show has helped you think about your own anger. I appreciate you spending an hour with me, and I wish you lots of self-development and growth as you go through your week.